Sup, and welcome to A Random Review, in which I, Velotus, review something that I just watched, or rewatched, or felt like reviewing, in no particular order, for no particular reason. Hence the name of this series. And today, what I'm reviewing is particularly random. It's an old game show documentary that only aired on television, that was never released commercially on home video. But you can still watch it thanks to some generous uploaders. And it's something I saw when I was a teenager, back when I was going through a phase where I was really into game shows, randomly. And I figured I would review it on here because I remember finding it interesting, and because I felt like reviewing another documentary after reviewing Jodorowsky's Dune way back. And plus, doing this would give me an excuse to revisit something that I watched when I was younger, which I'm all about. So that's what I'm doing. Today, I am reviewing Big Bucks, the Press Your Luck Scandal, which aired on the Game Show Network in 2003. Here's what this documentary is about. Back in the 1980s, there was a game show in America called Press Your Luck, in which there was a game board with a bunch of squares with prizes on them, and the contestants would take turns pressing a button to try to stop the game board when a square with a prize was highlighted. And each of the contestants had a set amount of spins, and if they could make it through all of their spins without landing on a whammy, which would immediately bankrupt you, you would carry that money forward, and whichever contestant had the most money at the end of the game would be the winner and would go home with all the money they had won. Basically, Press Your Luck was like Wheel of Fortune, except that instead of spinning a big wheel, you were pressing a button, and instead of there being bankruptcy wedges, there were whammies. And the thing with Press Your Luck is that the game moved so fast, and the board changed so quickly, and there were so many whammies, that it was difficult to actually win anything. It was called Press Your Luck because there was not a lot of skill involved. You had to be lucky to win, and the most anyone would ever win in one going was usually about $20,000. And this is where the quote-unquote scandal comes in, because in 1984, a middle-aged man named Michael Larson, an out-of-work ice cream truck driver, was watching Press Your Luck at home when he discovered that the way the game board was flashing was not actually random, that there was a pattern to it, or, to be specific, 5 patterns. And so, upon discovering this, he spent the next several months memorizing all 5 of these very quick patterns and where each of the flashes would appear on the board before it happened. And then he used what little money he had to fly to Los Angeles to try out for the show. And miraculously, the producers decided, hey, this guy seems like he really needs this. What the hell, let's put him on the show. What could go wrong? So he gets on the show, and because he had memorized the board and knew where the flashes were going to land, and because he knew that there were a couple squares where whammies never appeared and where he would keep getting new spins, he spent the entire game landing on those exact same spots over and over and over again. And when he was finally done, he had won over $110,000, about 3 times more than anyone had ever won on the show before. He went 45 spins in a row without hitting a whammy, which was supposed to be impossible. And what's great about this is that even though Larson wasn't playing the game the way it was intended, he wasn't technically cheating either, because there was nothing in the rules that said that you couldn't do that. Most people had no idea there was a pattern to the game board. And so, CBS, who produced Press Your Luck, didn't want to give him the prize money because they figured out what he'd done, but they also knew that he hadn't really broken any rules. And so, they begrudgingly gave Larson his money, and it was the most amount of money that anyone had ever won on a game show ever at the time. This was pre Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And for most of the documentary, you get to see Larson's whole appearance on Press Your Luck, which accounts for about 2/3 of the documentary's runtime. The other third is split between interviews and segments with the people who were involved in this when Larson went on the show. So you get to hear from the hosts of the show, the other contestants on the show, the producers of the show. You get to hear from Michael Larson's wife at the time and his brother. You get to hear from pretty much everyone you'd want to hear from, except for Michael Larson himself, because Larson had died of throat cancer 4 years before this aired. In other words, the documentary does its homework. But again, most of this is just rewatching the 2 episodes of Press Your Luck that Larson was on. And I know that might sound boring, especially since you know ahead of time what the outcome is, but it's surprisingly suspenseful, not only because you're appreciating the audacity of what he's attempting to do, but because you know that if he messed up even once, if he was slow on his button pressing by a millisecond, he could have lost everything. And it nearly happened. At the very end, he got tired and his concentration waned, and he accidentally stopped on a square that he didn't mean to stop on, that could have had a whammy come up. He came within a second of losing all $110,000, which is fitting because for all the skill that was required for him to be able to do all this, he still needed a little bit of luck in order to go home with all that money. I will say, though, that as compelling as the subject matter is, to me anyway, the documentary does sensationalize it to a notable degree. Big Bucks was produced like an old History Channel show, like one of their salacious, not so reputable alien-based shows. So it's got dramatic reenactments, it's got unnecessarily tense music, it puts a graphic on screen every time unaired footage is being presented, except that it only shows about 30 seconds of unaired footage, and so for every other second that they're replaying those Press Your Luck episodes, there's this totally pointless green graphic on screen that just says original 1984 broadcast, which, needless to say, didn't need to be displayed the entire time. And the coup de grace is that the documentary does these frame-by-frame breakdowns of Larson's facial expressions on Press Your Luck, and they're so over the top that they're hilarious. For instance, check out this one, which recounts one of the first times that Larson landed on a prize.
We get our first glimpse of that concentration at time code 1 hour, 7 minutes, 54 seconds. Michael stops chanting, and his eyes lock in on something just before he hits the button and wins his first bit of cash.
Stop!
And now, watch it again in slow-mo.
He went into like a trance. And that's the only way I can describe it. He went into a trance.
So keep your eyes on Michael's eyes as we go on. This is a man with a lot on his mind.
Now, was that necessary? That's not quite the tone that fits with what was going on screen. Like, the way the documentary treats him at times is like a cross between a serial killer and a lion that's stalking a frail gazelle. Because there are these moments where the narrator, who is the old host of Press Your Luck, is like, look at Larson's eyes as he stares at the board, like an apex predator. For instance, here's another instance where the tenor is a bit excessive for a guy who is on a game show.
Why so long? Well, look at it again, and watch his eyes this time. It's a great opportunity to really observe him. He's in full concentration. Then at time code 1:21:56, he relaxes, almost as if he's taking a mental break. He even chuckles.
If you knew nothing about Michael Larson and all you heard was that audio, you would think that Larson was a criminal mastermind who is about to blow up City Hall. It's very silly how they present him. However, I will say that as goofy as that framing is, the documentary is otherwise totally fair to him. Pretty much everyone in it concedes that he did deserve the prize money, and they even do a big toast to him at the end. In fact, had the documentary gone harder on him, it wouldn't have been unwarranted, because Larson was kind of sleazy. Case in point, and they talk about this in the documentary, the reason Larson discovered that the Press Your Luck board had a pattern to it when no one else did was that he had been spending all of his days staring at a bunch of televisions that he had hauled into the living room of his house, and they had all played a different TV channel, and he studied each of the channels specifically to discover if any of them contained a hidden secret that he could somehow exploit and make money off of. Michael Larson was like the one guy on Earth who was actively looking for Press Your Luck's loophole. And because he was spending every day not doing anything besides watching a bunch of TVs, and because he was neglecting his wife and wasn't working, his wife, in her own words, grew to despise him. Larson valued making money quickly over everything, so much so that years after his Press Your Luck appearance, he actually started a Ponzi scheme. He defrauded lots and lots of people out of money. And so, as great as it would be to celebrate him as this underdog hero who took a bite out of mighty CBS, he was only that one time. Otherwise, he was not a great person. The saddest revelation in the documentary is that, as it turns out, Larson was so obsessed with making more money that when he won that $110,000, he kept it at home instead of in a bank because he wanted to keep using that money to enter future contests. And because his neighbors knew that he had won all that money, and because he kept all that money on hand, like an idiot, one day, when he was at a Christmas party, someone broke into his house and stole all the cash that was left. And shortly thereafter, his wife, who had grown tired of him, left him and took their kids. So, in a roundabout way, winning all that money not only didn't improve Larson's life, it kind of ruined it. And it just goes to show that, yeah, you can get rich, but if you don't know how to enjoy life, if you don't know how to prioritize what's really important, having all that money doesn't mean anything. He won $110,000, and all it did was drive him further down a rabbit hole that turned him into a con man and made him lose his wife and kids. Michael Larson is a cautionary tale, because as much of an accomplishment as it is that he made all that money in less than an hour, he would have been infinitely better off if he had never been looking for patterns in game shows in the first place. So, overall, Big Bucks, the Press Your Luck scandal, is entertaining. It's not the deepest of documentaries. Like I said, you're mostly just going to be watching Michael Larson's Press Your Luck episodes. And I would say that of the in-between segments, there's about 5 minutes that probably should have been cut. But it's still totally watchable. Say what you will about Larson, but it's pretty captivating to see what he did. And even though the way the documentary frames him is occasionally over the top, its research is otherwise fine, and there's no glaring omissions to it or anything. So, if this sounds interesting to you, I recommend it. And if it doesn't, then, pass. But if you have 80 minutes to kill, and you're okay with watching something that might not be in the highest of definitions, then I think you'll dig this. I give Big Bucks, the Press Your Luck scandal, a 7.88 out of 10. And hopefully, if you're watching this far enough in the future from when this video was made, you'll actually be able to watch an officially released version of this documentary and not a crappy VHS recording like I had to rely on. But, c'est la vie.